What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about a list of cards that I think are overrated in Edison format, and I mean several things by this. There's like different types of overrated that are included in this video. I'm going to probably explain individually each one, but there's some cards that are like overrated by actual competitive players. A lot of cards on here are just overrated by like casuals or people who barely play the format, or maybe even people who don't play the format but just sort of have opinions on it anyway. And then there's some cards on here that are like inherently crazy but aren't like that useful in Edison format just because of how the format is. So I'm gonna try to sort of explain those. So we're starting off Nobleman of Crossout. This might seem weird, but I've got like acquaintances and friends and stuff who don't play the format, who think that this card is like actually used in Edison in any meaningful way, outside of just being a niche side deck card for like aggro decks that really hate Raikou or something. I think people get this impression from like historical lists where the flip monsters and stuff like Spy and Hamster were a lot more prevalent. But I mean, yeah, pretty much no one mains this card ever. Like you can't, if you main this card, you're bad. Well, I'm saying it right now. So it's pretty much just like some decks will play like one in the side, two in the side maybe, but that's about it. And even that's not common. I pretty much don't side this in anything ever. So yeah, that's how this card's overrated. We're kind of starting with the least egregious case on here, and moving up to the like most overrated cards. But next one up, I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this particular take. This one I think is overrated by competitive players. Actually, I've seen a lot of good players out there who think that Krebons is better than Deep Sea Diva, and I'm not gonna say that it's terrible. I'm not gonna say that it's bad. I'm not even gonna say that Welodad is not a good deck, because I think it's decent. I think it's solid, but Deep Sea Diva is just inherently better. Like we need to acknowledge this fact. Like I understand that it's cool, but like I can just put 3 divas in a deck, and like I don't have to build any package around it or whatever. I don't have to play any like power wells or whatever that might be dead in my opening hand. I can just like diva. It's one card. It's a +1. It's like a starter for itself. It puts 2 tuners on the field. Like for what the package is, it just does the job so much better. And of course, there are situations where Krebons is better to have. I'll acknowledge that. But on the whole, Deep Sea Diva is just better, I think. Like you're just better off playing the Diva deck, in my opinion, because it's just like so much smaller. You don't it doesn't require the setup. Like I understand that there are situations where having the Krebons to maybe stall can be useful, but that's pretty narrow. So I just think the Diva stuff is better. I'm like I said, I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate for this because people really do like the Welodad stuff, and I kind of like the Welodad stuff too. I enjoy it. I think it's fun, but I do think Deep Sea Diva is just inherently better. So that's the sense that I think this card is overrated. There's like a couple cards on here that I think are just worse versions of other cards, and they're overrated in that sense, and this is one of them. Okay, this is probably an even more egregious case of what I was just talking about. This card's kind of just overrated in the sense that anyone plays it. I mean, Dark Bribe, I think this might be a hot take. I think it's just a terrible card, just an awful card. I would never play this in anything ever. First of all, Starlight Road exists. I understand the format used to be in a position where this card was more prevalent because oppression was more prevalent. However, even that does not justify to me playing a card as bad as Dark Bribe. Like I honestly, maybe you should just play like Magic Drain or something. That might be a way out there kind of take. But Bribe just like reads turn your opponent's spell trap into Pot of Greed. Like unless you're negating like a torrential for 4 or some shit like that, I guess. But I don't know. It's just so bad. Like I would rather road my opponent's Heavy Storm than turn their Heavy Storm into Pot of Greed. Like that's not a great trade at all. So I think this card just sucks, especially with the like decline of oppression in main decks. Like there's just no reason to play this. It's like awful. Why am I giving my opponent a plus? Why am I giving my opponent a plus? It doesn't make sense. In like 90% of scenarios, this just sucks. So I think this card's terrible. I would never play it in anything. So that's kind of the sense in which I consider it to be overrated. Okay, this card, I know what you're thinking. Giant Tornade's insane. It's broken. It's like abusable in a bunch of ways and blah blah. It's all true. Okay, except for the fact that like there's nothing in Edison format that can actually like use this card in any way. And that might be a bit of an exaggeration, but like pretty much no deck plays this, as far as I'm aware. Like Cold Wave, absolutely. Tons of decks abuse Cold Wave, and that card is super sacky and degenerate. But as far as I can tell, there's nothing that's really found like any insane way of breaking Tornade. It's like the only conceivable use for it is to like push for game. It can't really generate any kind of advantage on its own. It's inherently a -1, like compared to the other spell trap removal cards. So this card is kind of just suffers from, I don't know, no one's found a great way to use it in the format yet. I can't think of like decks that would play this. I cannot think of a deck I would want to put this card in. So let me know down in the comments if there's something you would put this card in. It just hadn't seen much play. I don't know. It doesn't do much. So it's a card that like seems inherently crazy, and presumably a lot of people think that, but doesn't actually do anything. I guess that's just the takeaway for Giant Tornade. All right, so Dark Samorg is overrated in the sense that some people think it's a reasonable idea to like put this as a boss monster in a funny jank deck, and it's actually not even that good. It's just much worse than that. Like, I'm someone who has played Frost and Flame Dragon a lot, and I can confirm that I would rather play Frost and Flame Dragon as my deck's boss monster than Dark Samorg. Like, the Floodgate is that useless and that irrelevant, and like just never comes up and never does anything outside of like some small niche portion of games. It just does nothing proactive whatsoever. It's just like a 2700 guy with an obnoxious summoning condition. You have to like build a whole weird ass deck just to like bring it out. It's just not worth it. It's just not worth the payoff whatsoever. It's just, I feel like I never see it do anything, and I've tried playing it a ton of things. I've never been able to make it work in any reasonable sense. So I don't know. I just don't like this card. I don't think it's good. I don't even think it's bad. I just think it's terrible. It's just useless. So maybe I'm being too hard on Dark Samorg, but I think this card is just an awful boss monster that does nothing and isn't worth like even considering. So that's my take on that. Maybe some people disagree. Let me know in the comments if you think otherwise. All right, Pot of Avarice. This is a card that I've heard people complain about who don't really play the format so much. And the reason for that is kind of obvious. The card is inherently insane and definitely deserved to get hit on the ban list in the future. However, Edison Format is like too slow and too inconsistent to actually make use of it. There's like one deck that really can reasonably play this card, which is the Quick Draw Plant deck. Pretty much nothing else can possibly play it at all because of the fact that like you just can't afford to have this like brick card that requires multiple turns of setup. And most decks that like use their graveyard like need the stuff in their graveyard to stay in their graveyard. So it just actually becomes like this very narrow option that really isn't playable in most things. Like you can do some weird frog stuff with it, which is kind of crazy, but even most frog decks don't play this card. It's pretty much just like Quick Draw Plants and maybe Dragon Turbo or something. Like you got to be playing some hyper fast deck to actually incorporate this card again, because of just how like slow and inconsistent the format is compared to surrounding formats. So Avarice just really seems to like lack its luster compared to the surrounding much faster formats. This card just does not do much in Edison. There's not a lot of decks that I would play it in it at all, just because of like the inherent sort of slowness and brickiness of it. All right, this one might be the most controversial pick in the whole video, but I think Royal Oppression is the #1 most overrated card in Edison Format. Overrated by pretty much everyone, but especially overrated by like casuals who think this card ruins the format, or don't play the format because of it. And I kind of sympathize with that position. I sympathize with people who just hate Royal Oppression, because I hate Royal Oppression. I think it's inherently a super degenerate card. However, it's almost like the best comparison I can think of is like Maxi and Tengu Format. It's kind of taken the same trajectory, where it's like, because it's this crazy card out there in the format that everyone knows about, people just build their decks like and play style around it in such a way that it becomes sort of irrelevant, or at least not irrelevant, but like bad to incorporate in your main deck. Like it becomes like a side deck option, because you know, just so many decks have like, oh, here's all my answers to Oppression, here's how I play around Oppression, or here's how I don't care about Oppression at all. So it's just pretty much not even worth maining. I mean, some decks main like one because they're decks that play really good under oppression, but this card has really declined in terms of play in the format, and it'll probably stay that way just because, like, I don't know, people have figured it out and they're always just going to play around oppression from now till the end of time. Blackwing will always be like a high tier deck, so the threat of oppression will always be there, so people will never stop like playing around it and whatnot. But yeah, oppression just does not win a lot of games if you actually watch high level gameplay. Like, it is rare that you see like an oppression just get flipped and it's like, oh, well, the oppression was flipped, they can't do anything, game's over. It pretty much never actually happens in terms of high level Edison gameplay. So if you're someone who doesn't play Edison because you hate this card, I sympathize with you hating this card, but it actually isn't that bad in terms of its effect on gameplay in the format because of the reasons I've described and because of the way the format has developed. So that wraps up this list. If you would like to voice one of your, I'm sure, many disagreements, be sure to post down in the comments. Be sure to drop a like if you like the video. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. That's all I got for today. Peace out, YouTube.